Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. Today, I'm joined by Matt Sandoval. Matt is the Chief Executive Officer of Free Hearts for Abused Children of Arizona, a transformative organization dedicated to turning trauma into resilience through the power of art and meaningful mentoring relationships. With over 15 years of experience in nonprofit leadership, operations management, and community relations, Matt is a passionate advocate for mental health and trauma-informed care. Under his leadership, Free Arts serves children, teens, and families impacted by abuse, neglect, and homelessness, fostering resilience and creativity through innovative, equity driven programming. Matt is also a dynamic speaker and trainer, sharing his expertise on mental health and resilient living with diverse communities. We're excited to welcome Matt to discuss how Free Arts for Abused Children of Arizona transforms trauma into resilience through trauma informed art activities, mentorship, and community building, delving into the organization's origin, growth, and impact while highlighting the power of art in healing and fostering post traumatic growth in children. Welcome to the show today, Matt. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sharlee. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So, as we get started today, can you share the origin story of Free Arts for Abused Children of Arizona and what inspired its creation?
Yeah, we're going into our 32nd year of operation here in Arizona, and it was inspired by a project similar to what we do here in LA. So Free Arts LA, which still exists. We're not connected in any legal or formal way as corporations, but the ideas about what we do have a lot of things in common. So if we rewind things back to 1993, we have our founder, Margaret Beresford, who is a board certified art therapist, saw a unique space beneath the clinical where we could offer expressive arts, art activities, creative expression to children and teens that are in a very vulnerable population. They are in the foster care system or they live in a shelter due to experiencing homelessness or domestic violence. So her passion was to bring the arts with adult mentors that are just ordinary people. And that's been our mantra from the beginning, that art plus mentors equals resilience. And we've now served over 170,000 children and teens in Arizona. We've been very strongly in Maricopa County, which is the general area where Phoenix is, but serving a little bit more into other parts of the state, and always excited to talk about what we do with the hope that someone else outside of Arizona might take the inspiration that we offer and do something similar for the populations that they serve in their neighborhood.
Wow, reaching over 170,000 children is no small feat. It sounds like an amazing program. How did you personally get started with it?
I've been with Free Arts for 2.5 years, and I got a role here as staff the old-fashioned way. Saw a job posting, so it's pretty uncommon these days at like the VP level or above, and to come onto a new role without it being a network, without a relationship that somebody introduced you to. But I applied the old-fashioned way and came in as the vice president of programs and served in that role for a year. And then after a year being with Free Arts, our executive director of almost 8.5 years left. And so they'd been thinking about this as the time for their departure. So that created an opening there. And I began a year and a half ago as the CEO of Free Arts.
Nice, nice. And so I am a social worker with years of experience working with children who've experienced trauma in the school districts. And so I can, personally have lots of stories of how trauma impacts children. And so the idea that arts can in essence heal those types of traumas. Can you talk to us a bit more about how Free Arts focuses on providing trauma-informed art activities and more of a discussion of how art can serve as a bridge for building relationships and fostering healing in children who've experienced trauma?
Yeah, I love your question. Very in depth because it talks about everything we're possibly doing. So beginning with the reality of being trauma informed means we train everybody, staff and volunteers,
Nice.
to understand the impact, to recognize the impact, and to do what we can to avoid re-traumatization. So because we are not in the full clinical role of therapist and doing treatment, diagnoses, treatment planning, all those things that require case notes, we intentionally stay in a space where we are that community support around. We are creating community of well-being. And that means most of our expressive art activities are done to be done within an hour, a short session. We obviously have other things that might be gallery, exhibit worthy type projects, but many of our activities stand alone as offering a couple of important things. The arts are relaxing, right? It is something that is fun to do. It is something that is engaging to a wide spectrum of people. There are other mentoring models, one-to-one. We do group. Everything we do is in groups. But for the arts, we're capturing people that maybe are not as enthused by sports or other forms of activity that the mentoring is taking place with. And because we use basically every medium of art, that if there's an artist, the inspiration for it, and children and teens want to do it, we'll do it. So we do everything from music to theater to visual arts, spoken word, poetry. I even believe we've had projects where people create their own little shows, so what we're doing here is creative. And so we create opportunities for that to happen. And so what's important about the art activities themselves from a trauma-informed perspective is our volunteers know what the experiences have been like, what it means to support someone who needs regulation. We understand there's some toolkit parts to being a mentor that are helpful. We call one of those treasure hunting, which is looking for the strengths in people, very strengths perspective for those of us with a social work background. It connects same idea to that. But then also recognizing that part of the art activity is a brand new view of self. And many people, even when they love the arts, are tasked with something new. And immediately these very common feelings of self-judgment, comparison to others, a need to finish, the deadline. So we're so wired these days to compete, to achieve. And our expressive arts programs exist to allow people to enjoy the process and allow the process itself to be the guide. And so that will be very familiar for those that have creative and expressive art components to their therapeutic training. We are about process. We're allowing people to take the art in their direction at their own pace. And so that means we're not intentionally prompting for negative, adverse experiences. We have prompts and activities that are general. However, we know people are easily triggered by a wide range of environment, including their own intrusive memories. So we train people to be able to sit with and to support somebody as they regulate over time. And some of our art activities are these mindfulness, imagery, expressive arts type things that help people regulate, help people ground. So we hope that part of what we're doing here is also building skills.
Nice, nice. And you are absolutely correct in that being able to have it opens doors to conversation with children of all ages when you just give them some type of activity, whether it is something with their hands, doing art or crafts, or just having a conversation or allowing them to express themselves. And I smile really big when you said allowing them to make a show or something in theater, because I think a lot of times people think arts and that's just something, a craft project or painting, when a lot of times children want to express themselves in other ways. It really helps you reach a wider range of children. So I have a question about those. How are the volunteers supported? How are they trained to foster that type of post-traumatic growth? As you mentioned, children have experienced different levels of trauma and all different ways of their life. And so how are volunteers able to address those things, not necessarily in a therapeutic way, but how are they able to address them as they arise?
Yes, great question. And it's something we've gone about very thoughtfully because of the importance of the work that we're doing. The first thing I want to say is you don't have to be a professional artist or one that's aspiring to be a professional artist to be a mentor. You have to be caring and you have to be available. So there are levels to the art. We have entire art activities where the instructions come with, and you with another adult pair up and go to a location where our children live, foster care group home or a shelter, deliver the programming for the day with art supplies we provide for you. So your availability, your willingness is all part of it. We do, however, recruit a lot of people who love the arts. They have a form, they have a medium, and they'll do anything that's creative. And so it feels like a second home to them. But regardless of their comfort with art, everyone is trained the same way. So we begin with orientation. We help people understand what our organization is about. Yes, there are many challenges that young people face, but we have a very narrow set of populations because, you can intentionally broaden out all the children. And sure, everything we do here is good for any person. That's definitely a value that we hold. But to be true to our mission and to be true to those who fund us, we focus on this audience. And so that means we tell them in orientation about what the training will look like, what it means to be a mentor, what the scheduling looks like. We also begin to set some important questions that we hope every mentor can answer. And one of them, a major one, is, are you in a place personally where you can put the children first? And it is quite common for people who get involved at Free Arts to have their own post-traumatic growth journey happening. And in some cases, we've had people who have been working either in support groups or with therapists who are being recommended, you should do something out in the world, pay it forward, get involved in the
Yeah.
community. And some of our volunteers will describe that that's part of their motivation, which is great. But we also want to balance out that we are not setting up conditions in which we expect children to comfort the mentor for difficult things. We want to be in a place to put the child first. And so that means, not being the kind of listener that's just waiting for the person to be quiet so you can share a story that's more, than the person who's talking at the moment. And so we're very careful about positioning how we listen and how we approach children and teens in our programs. So orientation is the beginning. As those that are interested with that, we offer a 6.5-hour training that takes us through the impacts of trauma. We don't talk about instances, but we do talk about the prevalence, what it means, what happens to us at a nervous system level. We talk about environmental adversities and traumas. So one of our prevailing logos and I think metaphors for what we do, is a tree. It's in our logo. Free Art says a tree is a logo because trees are good stand-ins for what makes people grow. You need soil, you need conditions, you need to be put in the right place. Often you could be judgmental of a tree's growth, but you've cut off the water and it's in the wrong region and it's not going to be successful there. So we see people in the same way, that people have an instinct naturally to grow over time if the conditions are right. And so we realize too, that for our audience that is experiencing the trauma of separation due to being in child welfare or living in a shelter environment, there's been a lot of environmental challenges probably on that person and that family for a while. So that could be income, it could be social, it could be stigmatizing attitudes and beliefs. So we help people understand that and understand that this is the context. Doesn't mean we start our interactions and say, hello, children, I'm sure you went through these things. We're not that direct. We are helping people understand the context because we believe that's an opener to more empathy, which is being able to say to the person around us, I have something in me that might know what it feels like to be in your situation. Doesn't mean it is, and doesn't mean it captures it all. And that's what empathy is. It's a powerful choice. And we know it's a choice because there are people in our society who choose not to do it. And so we've run into them, we've heard them talk, and that is a real challenge. So moving into our 6.5 hours of that training, then we move in the second half into the toolkit, our commitment as mentors to put the children first, to guard confidentiality, privacy. We also throughout the day put in regulation activities and we do some art projects. And they're the kind of art projects that anybody can take and do anywhere. So if you've got music, if you got something to draw with, one of the example pieces that we'll do is something you can take with you. And from there, there's one last stage. We have a one-to-one interview where we really gain the feedback of the person about the training experience so far, how they understand Free Arts, and again, gauging that central question, are you in a place personally where you could put children first? And once somebody is ready to commit, we think about scheduling. And a feature of what we do here, it's highly flexible. We do a lot of group-based mentoring that happens kind of in seasons. So you could pick 4 to 6 weeks in one location. You can pick up to 12 in a different, or you could be like a volunteer that I just spent time with on Saturday. We were tabling at a arts and culture event and they volunteer a few times a year on a Saturday and they spread the word about Free Arts, or they might do this at an art and culture program where we have brought children from our partner agencies to that art and culture, a museum, a performance stage, for that day, for that activity. And so we call that a free art day, and it's a standalone day. So in that way, being a mentor is pretty flexible to a busy person's life, because a one-to-one model, as important as it is, can be it can be a barrier for some people in terms of time.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
one of the features of free arts is that we're scalable there. I think a pretty good scan of what the process is like in recruiting a mentor that
Mhm.
ends up being a regular human being. Some have some clinical backgrounds and they just like to volunteer in this way. Most do not. And we welcome that. We welcome the average person learning more about the situation and how to care for one another.
I really can appreciate the depth of training and support you provide to your mentors. That is essential. And really, just like you said, opening their eyes to not necessarily some of the situations, but the impact that it can have on a child, on just a human in general, and how it can really change their life. You mentioned that the programs are generally operated in shelters and in group homes, which again, I can appreciate because you're meeting people exactly where they are. But let's talk a bit about what makes those environments uniquely challenging and also rewarding for this type of work.
Yeah, for one, and it's a small snippet of our training is to help the volunteers understand that when they perhaps go to a group home, they might see a little bit of organized chaos, a lot of
Mhm.
voices, a lot of people, sometimes some stressed out staff. I'm not intending to call anyone out. I'm just
Understood.
saying when you're running this kind of environment with so many schedules, so many people, shift changes, and you don't know if there's been some behaviors before you show up with your drums and you're ready to do the drums, but half the room is not talking to the other half of the room and you're
Yeah.
just trying to figure that out. So, imagine a congregate care setting where, and this is a central challenge of the young people we're serving, is at this point, because of their circumstance and also their age, they don't have a ton of control over where they want to be.
Yep.
And so that is a little of their living arrangement. That doesn't mean the people aren't kind and caring, but that is some of the environment itself. And then the staff in these centers, they have difficult jobs. So often they've got to make a couple shuttle runs to pick everyone up from school, make sure everybody gets to their appointments. And if, they catch the wrong freeway exit at the wrong time, now we're behind. And so these stresses kind of build. And so it's something we talk about because it's just a feature of the environment that these can be a little noisy, a little chaotic, but we're bringing an intentional experience around the arts, perhaps as a buffer around what might feel really busy sometimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just have a home with two of my own children, and it can be
Mhm.
like that sometimes. So working in group settings, it definitely can. And being able to expose that to mentors and volunteers will help prepare them for the way ahead. I know that you mentioned that a lot of times there may be chances for showcases or maybe performances, but can you talk a bit about how children are able to share their creative work and if there's any significance to being, given that chance to show off what they've done?
Yes, thank you for the question. This is a great one. In most cases, the artwork done by children, young people is theirs. We don't keep it, we don't try to sell it. It belongs to them. And then even when we do share things, and there's some examples behind me, some I bought and some that come from programs, we do that with their permission. Like, we're leaving that with you. Can we use it for display? When you take a tour of our building, which is in basically downtown Phoenix, a lot of the art on the wall tells the story, some of it done by participants, others by professional artists. So there's pieces belong to young people. That's generally true. And then there are some things we do from the beginning where we have said, this is for the purpose of exhibition. Would you like to be part of it? So there are pieces in our building that were done to be displayed, collage type mixed media. And then I would be remiss by not mentioning probably the Super Bowl of Free Arts Days, which is our theater camp performance. So this is the culmination of 12 days of high school students who've decided they would like to go through a theater camp. On a Monday, they start rotating workshops between dance and music and sketch writing. And then 12 days later on a Friday night at the Herberger Theater West, which is a large stage venue in downtown Phoenix, they deliver around a 75-minute performance that they wrote themselves. So that 12 days comes with a lot of support from professional artists, volunteer mentors, and it's a really intense camp experience. There's nothing quite like it, but that is part of that program, the feature being We're going to do a performance. You will be under the bright lights. I've spoken at it. I know the intensity of those lights. You have to feel it. You have to go out there and go, I cannot see past the second row. I'm
Yeah.
terrified. But it's the friendliest audience. It's open to our stakeholders. We don't sell tickets to the public, but we do say you can, if you are a donor, a volunteer, a friend of Free Arts in our database, you get a chance to sign up and come. There's never a dry eye in the theater because the art is, as it should be, fully expressive in the moment from somebody who's trying their best with a crowd that is literally snapping as encouragement. And it's something gentle you can hear a variety of moments because this is often the first time they've stepped out on such a stage. So it can be intimidating. And one of our culminating efforts at Free Arts is, has the program helped you decide that you can do a hard thing, not just anyone's hard thing, but a hard thing that you want to do. And you need these experiences of engaging in that temporary experience of hardship toward a goal that helps you know that when the next one comes, whether it be a job interview, college, talking to the person you have a crush on, whatever it might be, that you can do something difficult that feels difficult now because you've had this past experience. Perhaps our theater camp is one of them, where you took that risk of trying something new and it paid off and people supported you along the way. And that helps kind of counter this sense that we're alone, that people don't keep an eye on us, that it's all up to us. And in reality, I think a great theater camp performance rewards the bravery of the art, but also represents how our community is interconnected and supportive fundamentally. And that's a great reminder for people.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Most of us spend more time at work than anywhere else doing anything else. So why not spend that time in a job you love? Introducing Triad's Jobs Marketplace, the only job site dedicated specifically to behavioral and mental health professionals. Featuring more than 1,000 open jobs from dozens of behavioral and mental health employers, and searchable by location, professional field, employment type, specialization, and more. Jobs Marketplace helps you find your next career opportunity. Full-time, part-time, or gig time, make the most of your time. To access Jobs Marketplace, register for your free professional account at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT, and then click to Jobs Marketplace. If you're already a member of the Triad community, visit app.hellotriad.com/jobs. That's app.hellotriad.com/jobs. Visit us today and take your next career step tomorrow.
Absolutely. And one of the things that it might have been a small little piece, but I caught it. And you said that you give the children a choice. Having a choice is one of the most important things that I have seen in trauma-informed care, because you also mentioned that children in these situations, they don't have a choice to be where they are, to live where they are, to not be, safe in a sense. And so giving them a chance, a choice to do something is pretty powerful. And it gives
Yeah,
them
I'd like
that
to highlight
opportunity.
that. I had an experience a couple months ago training some new mentors, and we said the statement about, your voice matters, and it's on some of our signage. It's definitely part of camp. It's a value in some of the paperwork. And somebody asked a very important, but I thought at the moment, I took it as like, well, isn't the answer obvious? Well, no, if they're asking, why is it that important for somebody to believe that my voice matters? And I think it helps us to realize that whatever our experience has been so far as the adult, and having some level of being able to stand up for myself or advocate or express my own wishes and wants, that there are people around us who don't have those options.
Yep.
And it's hard for us to even anticipate that that's the case. So when we talk about the experienced people in the living centers that we're talking about, how regimented their schedule is comes up. The things they have to be part of, whether they want to do something else or not. It doesn't mean they don't get free time, but when you're managing a lot of people, you have to have schedules, and there has to be other spaces for us to have some me time, be creative with that. So for us, part of that trauma responsiveness is noting that not everyone is primed and ready to go when they show up for program.
Mhm.
We love them them to be, but in some cases they need a little bit of time or they
Yeah.
need another activity. And so
Right.
we do not, and this has to be discussed sometimes, we don't take a punitive approach to when people don't feel like it in the moment. Okay, well, we'll let you do something different. You want to just watch? Do you want to join in if you change your mind? Doors open, and we adjust when that happens. And more often than not, people who need that break engage. But when we think about what's the purpose of somebody kind of, figuring out, do I want to do this? When you think about the life experiences that have led up to where they're at, they have every right to want to make sure the environment is safe and that
Absolutely.
the activity makes sense and that this is something that matters to them. So we respect that part. And it's a subtle thing we say, but a very important part to our audience. And it can be a little bit of news to people who've had are used to having a lot of choice over
Yes.
their own life.
Right. Right. And so in the beginning, it seemed like Free Arts was more of a program geared towards foster care, children that, had experienced trauma in that way. But it seems to have expanded from that to other areas like youth detention centers. You mentioned the camp, maybe even some family-based programming. Can you share more about that type of growth and the impact that it's having on the community?
Right. So we were anchored in those populations. And then, based on a unique feature of Arizona State's tax system, there are some credits available from taxpayers if they donate to you and you're a foster care serving agency. So that means whatever we do, expense and numbers wise, we have to always be above 51% in foster care. So that other 49% of who we're serving can be much broader than that. So we've thought through what are some of the other difficulties that are really not, they're distinctions without differences. Like, we're not going to say just because you have the wrong kind of trauma, you can't be part of this. So what does that mean? We have a fabulous, relatively new partnership with ACASI, which is the Arizona Child and Adolescent Survivor Initiative. These are children and families in which one adult parent in the room, it's often a parent, can be an extended family member, has died due to domestic violence. So talk about the ultimate types of difficulty facing young people, domestic violence itself, but also one that is ending in the death of a caregiver. So that doesn't quite touch the original audiences, but it is something that we can and should serve. We've also grown into serving refugee and immigrant children, in particular, those that are in unaccompanied minor shelters. And those are young people through their own story are seeking refuge in the United States without an adult to chaperone them. So that agency's work is to find adults either in a foster care setting or often other extended family members. But while they are determining that placement, they live in shelters. And so we do programming with them. And it's some of the most powerful programming we have because they have the ability to take kids in vans to different places for programs. So we'll have nights where, 2 or 3 of these vehicles come to our building and we do this program for a couple of hours. And we know it makes a difference because young people tell us the value of this. They tell us it's the thing they're looking forward to. It's the thing that's helping them move forward. It's the way they can start to count on some people that they know to be safe, that an environment that is fun. And so those are some other areas outside of the original kind of population centers that we started to serve.
Okay. And piggybacking on some of the ending statements that you said, I was smiling big when you said it about how the children feel and how they tell you how the impact is having on them and what they're feeling. So Matt, can you share a personal story or an example that highlights the transformative impact of these arts programs on a child?
I'd love to. We have a saying here that we want to take the lesson, leave the story. So I'll be light on the details, but you'll get the drift. So when you were thinking about and you said it earlier about doing activities with the mentor, my first year here in camp, I decided to be part of camp as a counselor, but I basically said to staff and volunteers, don't tell anybody who I am. Don't tell them don't tell them title stuff. Just let me be in a group a whole week long. I want the whole camp experience as anyone else would get it. So being a new person, it was pretty easy to pull off. Although by the next to last day, somebody in the group's like, "Are you important?" I'm like, "We're all important, right?" So we're getting
Good
some
answer.
kind of vibe there. But all that to say, over a couple of days, I was working with teenagers, which can be notoriously rough, although I love working with teenagers.
I
Like,
do
give me
too.
the angst. I'm good.
Mhm.
Let's do this. And so here's an example. We were doing an art activity that was about making hot air balloons out of paper mache. It was a multi-day because you've got to blow up the balloon, you've got to get the paper on it, you got to let it dry, then you paint it. And then the third day, you start attaching the strings for the basket. So by the end of the week, you have this beautiful basket that you made. So here's a mistake adults make. I've heard you've had a tough time, young person. Why don't you tell me about it? And like, no kid has ever wanted that opening prompt, right?
Mm-mm.
So what does the arts do is we just worked on the project together. And by about the third day, a couple teenagers just started saying, I got this court date coming and I'm really nervous about it. And this is them, right? This is really not about the details. This is them realizing I've done this with this group. It feels safe. They seem supportive. I've had this on my mind. I can bring it up. And it wasn't we didn't make them bring it up. We didn't say that what the topic needed to be. This became what we're primed to do as human beings. When we feel safe connection, we can show a little bit of vulnerability. And that vulnerability is an invitation for some support. And so being able to support these people who are going through difficult things where there's a lot of uncertainty that affects them personally at a young age. And so, the mistake, because we have time and schedules and we need to fill out forms, we want them to tell us right now, what's on your mind versus taking this slow approach. And to be honest, if this person doesn't experience anything more than just a relaxing time or an opportunity to learn a new art skill, that is okay as a goal itself, right? But in this case here, when I think about what is the unique offering that this creates for people, is that this person was open to sharing in a way with somebody they had just met over time because they learned to trust the activity in the environment. And that's what free arts is about.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. So let's talk for a second about any new challenges, not just with child welfare laws, but with, some of the laws that are being implicated coming in from Washington. Like, what is that looking like? How does that change the focus for future direction of free arts, or does it? Like, how does it impact it?
Yeah, I think we are all in a big period of uncertainty. We, as a nonprofit, exist entirely on donor support. So there's not an economic engine here that powers us. We're not another nonprofit that's got a clothing center or a gym and swim or any of those kind of concepts, all good that they are. We depend, and we're as big as our donor base will be. We don't have too many government contracts. That might be a focus area right now, but we do have some. And then, if things do change in the funding world, that causes the individual donor to think about perhaps giving to more than one place. And so they might still give the same amount of money, but agencies might be kind of dropped from who they're supporting. So that's a challenge that we're not quite sure whether or not that is going to happen and how much it might happen. And I also think like there's a place for us to say, right, that when there are acute stressors in reality, naturally a lot of our support goes to like shelter and food. But those aren't important. I don't want to say that. And so people might think about free arts as like a secondary, like that's more later. That's if there's excess funds. We got to fund food and shelters now. And so my thought to that gently, although it's going to sound a little direct, is there are places in our society where they provide you shelter and food and free healthcare. It's called prison. And they don't also create a space for socialization, for meaningful connection. And that's what free arts does alongside the other services. So I would just encourage everyone to see that, like, yes, food and shelter and all these things, along with social needs, these are all part of what makes, people grow and flourish. And so we definitely fit in to partner agencies that are providing those frontline services. But I don't think meaningful connections too far off the front line. I think as soon as we're trying to stabilize, we need other people to help us do that, both in the clinical therapeutic sense, but also in the everyday day-to-day sense. The last thing on this one that I was thinking about, as you said, the question is, I'm really wondering what the role is for a free art type organization in supporting children in foster care around a concept that's called felt permanency, which is realizing that children are often being put into new settings repeatedly. I've heard stories from our adults that were aged out of the system of being placed over 20 times. So when you're placed over 20 times, how many times are you ready to say, great, I'm in a new environment. Let me make friends. Let me try this. You're not. You don't, it doesn't make sense anymore. Like they're just going to change it. Why bother? So what
Right.
felt permanency is as a system is it's ideological, is how do we create systems that care for people in child welfare where we can maintain as many of the relationships that the child has. So that could be their friends from their neighborhood, their school from their neighborhood, not have them change schools every time they place in a new environment. Could free arts in its environment be able to follow a young person if they change locations? Right now, we depend on our partner agencies to bring children to us. And we've had instances where we've planned a whole camp activity around this particular cohort coming, and then whoever is their sponsoring agency in child welfare shuffles where the children live. And suddenly this group of kids that was about to take our program is living somewhere else. And yes, we serve some numbers, but what happens to both of these? And so I've been thinking about it. I don't have any great answers, but I do think it's an emerging part of what's good in child welfare is to think about how we support things like felt permanency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what is one key takeaway you hope listeners will carry with them about the power of art in healing trauma and building resilience?
Yeah, I think it's in our recipe. Art plus mentors equals resilience. What do we mean by that? Essentially, art heals. It is an opportunity constantly to turn down the striving mechanism we all have to achieve and to measure up. It also is an opportunity for self-compassion. Can I just exist with this? We have a very powerful mantra here that there are no mistakes in art, that what you create has value because you have value. It's your voice. And that we don't need to say, like, I need to be a gallery level professional artist. I can create for my own value and enjoy it simply for that sake. And then we can have an environment that recognizes that. And the second is that relationships heal. That's what the mentoring's about. And when you boil things down, whether it's therapeutic or not, how we buffer stress as a social creature is by having close, trustworthy relationships in which we could expose a safe amount of vulnerability, receive some validation and support. So it is intensely validating to just have somebody say, that must be hard. That must be difficult. And also to encourage you. I see your strengths coming out. I hear your voice. And I can see the impact you want to make. Don't let go of that. Channel that. That's going to guide you. So I think those are the takeaways. And what's great is whether or not you volunteer at Free Arts or you are a participant at Free Arts, you can have a place in your life for creative expression, and you should do what you can to support the quality and strength of your own personal relationships.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up today, can you tell our listeners where they can follow up with Free Arts and learn more about you, your program, and I hear you're hosting a symposium. Tell us
Yes.
more about that.
Yes, August 16th in Scottsdale at the Sky Song, we are hosting the Resilient Heart Symposium. So this is that perfect mesh between our mentoring work and our creative work. So there's art, there's trauma-informed care, and this is really designed for anyone in the space that is working with children and families, of which art can be a role, can be a medium, can be part of their programming. So you don't have to be a mentor with us. We've had people from schools attend. We've had people who love the art attend. We've had one-to-one mentoring agencies come and say, oh, let's figure out how we add creativity to the things that we're doing. So that is the Resilient Hearts Symposium, August 16th in Scottsdale. The second thing I would say is our podcast called Canvas of the Heart. We do about an episode a month where we kind of dig a little deeper into the concepts around free art. We also interview artists and volunteer mentors. So you can hear, don't take it from me, listen to them about what it's really like to go through our programming here. And then in the show notes, we'll leave our URL and you can get connected to anything at Free Arts, from becoming a mentor, learning more how to support us financially, or how to find our podcast or the symposium. So we'll leave the URL in that as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Matt, I have truly enjoyed speaking with you and learning more about your arts program. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the great work that you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was great to be here. Thanks so much, Sharlee.
And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. But before you go, we'd love your help. Please leave a review and share the podcast with a friend. By spreading the word, you help us grow and reach more people, allowing others to discover the valuable insights shared in each episode. Thank you for being such an important part of the Behavioral Health Today community. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.